Hello and welcome. This is the Vietnam Voices series, a project by the Billings Gazette, sponsored by Master Lube, and it is October 16, 2015, shortly after 9 o'clock, and today, this is great. I am really excited. This is going to be fun. It marks the first time that another journalist has ridden alongside me in one of these interviews. I, of course, cannot ever be seen on camera, but today I have Erik Olson with me, and Erik has with him, and I'm very excited about this too, his father, Ken Olson. And Ken was a veteran of the U.S. Navy from 1969 to 1973, and he's going to share part of his Vietnam veteran stories. But it's really something special when we can have father and son in the studio and have this conversation. And many people may know Ken Olson served as a longtime Laurel, Montana mayor, and all around a good guy. So I'm excited to talk today. So thank you, Erik. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You bet.
Again, son to your left, father to your right, right?
Hopefully that's clear.
All right. Well, Ken, let's start at the beginning, because that's the only place I know. Kind of seems like the best place of all to start. Where were you before 1969, and what were you doing?
I graduated from Laurel in '67, and I went to college at Eastern, which is now Montana State B. And 1969 came around. I found that I didn't really think that was the area I wanted to keep going into. So
what were you studying?
Pre-wildlife,
okay,
which had to do with animals, not what you think about. But although that other part got into part of my decision to leave.
Right. Wow.
It kind of went hand in hand.
You were living up to your major?
In that regard, I was doing an A+. But
right.
Yeah, the other part, I just felt that there's a time to go some other direction. And I thought at this time I'd just go ahead and see what it was like to go to the draft, not to the draft, but to the enlistment and see what they had to say. And a buddy of mine and I went up. He didn't go in, I did. I signed, went home, told the folks. They weren't too happy.
Right.
But 18 years old or above 18, and so I got into a good position. I signed that day, but I didn't go in until 3 months later, which made an important part, because when I got out, I was an E4/4, which meant I was career designated, and I had more benefits, unbeknownst to me. And also the guy who ended up I signed for said, well, what do you want to be? And at the time I thought electronics, because in '69, '70s, that was kind of the buzz. Everybody wanted to. So I said, I'd like to be in electronics. And he says, well, I'll see you get in that school. Well, he did. I got into a 1 year. The Navy put me through a year-long school in electronics. And then during that time, they said he had some choices. And that's when I volunteered to go to Vietnam, and I volunteered for flight. They then gave me my orders to VW1, which was in Guam. And I went over to Guam. I was ship's company for about 6 months, which means you clean barracks, you serve food, you don't do anything that has to do with flight, but you serve as ship's company. You just do all the work that supports the activity. And I eventually got into a billet, which was a radioman. They sent me to a crypto school, which was, I ended up with a top secret crypto clearance, which was kind of unique. They told me to tell my parents that there would be somebody coming to town to check on me for this clearance. And I just thought I was in the service, and these guys were always feeding you a line, so I didn't call back. And pretty soon I got a call from my dad, and he says, hey, bud, how's it doing? And I said, oh, what are you doing calling me? And he says, we got a couple of guys here walking around town checking you out. I said, oh, about that, I forgot to tell you. So that was kind of I never realized, and then later on, as I became acclimated to my position, I realized that the position that I allowed myself to be put into was a little more important than what I thought it was. Not so much my presence there, but the overall mission was very important, and it had a lot of substance to what was going on throughout all different spheres. The FOONs, the SOJs, which was not a nice job either, but it had to be done. And of course, the GOTs, the Gulf of Tonkins. They were all three very important and required by your utmost ability to perform. And I like to think I did all right.
Right. When you, so had you come from a military family?
Oh, Dad was a staff sergeant in World War II. He never got overseas. He stayed here. He developed polio when he was younger, and his one foot is smaller and one leg is shorter, and consequently he couldn't do a lot of walking. So he ended up being a clerk in I can't remember the battalion he was in, but it was out of I think it was Boise.
Okay.
He was stationed.
When you decided to join, so they weren't too amused when you came home and said, "Guess what?"
No, they wanted their only son to be some type of a professional.
Okay.
And that would have been fine with me too, but I think every fella at one time or another, they want to leave and get their own roots going. Mm-hmm. And I graduated from high school, but I never left the house. I went from going to high school to going to college from the same house.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
I think that was part of it. I wanted to get out and start to feel how I would be accepted going forward. And that was one of the options. And, as I look back on it, sometimes you didn't feel like you made the right decision because of the circumstances around you. But other times you really felt that you were blessed because there were some things that were going on that you could only be explained by being there and not by just hearing of it. And I really feel that other than people trying to kill you, it wasn't too bad of a spot over there.
Yeah,
it was okay.
What were some of your thoughts about the war in the late '60s before, basically, in the time of graduating high school to before you went? What did you think about it then?
That's really a good question. A lot of people dwell on that, and I didn't. I don't know whether or not it was the nativity of me just being not real familiar with all of the surroundings. I just didn't get into that. I know now when I look, I'm retired. So sometimes I get a chance, I look at these Netflix and there's some of these old films that I see about how people were dealing with Kent State and a lot of things like that. And I look back and I says, my goodness, what was people thinking back then? Why did I do what I did? But in my sphere, in my area of control, it didn't really play a part in it. I can remember writing a letter back to Mom and Dad from Nam and saying, well, there's not going to be anybody who's going to tell me what I feel I should be doing as compared to what they think. Erik knows this better than anybody. I'm a very independent guy. Erik, same way. And it's just that also, if it didn't really influence me in my fiber, I didn't let it affect me. And so I don't know if I've dodged your question or surrounded it with a lot of clouds. No. But that's basically where I was at. There was no really passion for me not to go in. I felt that, and I've told Erik this a lot, I felt that to a degree I had a duty to go because country called. That was part of the decision to go in. But it also came into part of my life when other things were just what I thought they would be, and I needed a change. And that basically put me in the position where I was at.
So when you let's talk a little bit about, so you're trained in electronics, and then you find yourself 6 months basically doing support, not kitchen, maybe KP, all of that. Did you ever think to yourself, so this is what I signed up for?
Not once.
Okay.
I'm kind of a day-to-day guy back then. It's like any other kid, I think. My purpose in life was not to change the world. My purpose in life was what am I going to do tomorrow? Just like any guy. I think every once in a while you meet a fella that was in the service. Vince Johnson was one of them I can remember, who was focused, very focused on what they wanted to do. I think your dad was another one I could put in that realm. They were focused on what they wanted to do, and they strived real hard on a day-to-day basis to improve in their position to achieve the goal they had. And Vince Johnson, I was really fortunate. As an airman, they chose me to be his second radio. In other words, he was the first radio, I was the second. And he was just a kid, just like I was, maybe 1 or 2 years older. And he went about his work with a deliberate effort. Everything he did had a reason, and he took his position very seriously. There are some guys on crews that didn't, and we weeded those guys out pretty quickly, because it's a fact. If somebody screwed up on the crew, you jeopardized everybody. And if somebody had a flighty instance and it did not gel with the overall mission, they found a way to not be part of the crew. Vince was the kind of guy who instilled upon me the fact that we're going to do something, it is of importance, and it deserves our full attention. And it woke me up about the second time I was out with him on flight. If he was on the radio, he was on the radio with a professional mannerism, and he performed to the utmost of his ability. It was not perfect, but it was the best that Vince could do, and you could expect no more. And he went about his way of teaching by example. And I only knew him for about a year. I was put on the fast track for second radio. By the second mission, they cut me loose, and I had my own position. But I think those type of people that had that type of focus of what was going on around them, they're extremely rare, and I was fortunate enough to be involved with at least one of them during my time.
Probably a good one to come across for the first time.
Excellent.
I mean, early on in your career, rather than the last day.
Yeah, there are a couple other guys that I could have been hooked up with that were real knotheads, but they were not there for any other reason than themselves.
Yeah.
And Vince was not. And, in a lot of regards, Vince was looked at as kind of a different type of fella. He just wasn't, party time or whatnot, he was not there. He was not just, he was more of a insightful person. He wasn't one that was spontaneous. Every action deserved thought, and that thought would bring him to the proper move that he would do. So he self-taught himself Japanese.
Wow.
How do you do that?
Yeah. Especially as an English speaker,
How do you do that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he did that.
Wow.
So that
is impressive. So let's talk a little bit about what you're on the ship or the airplane, as most of us would know it. On the airplane, your job was radio operator. Tell us a little bit about what your job was on these flights, sorties, missions, whatever we call them.
Well, depending upon which one it was. Basically, I had the responsibility of all the communication and navigation aboard that aircraft. If you'll notice in the picture, that's a big plane, but there's only certain black boxes and radios that are responsible for communication and navigation. That was my responsibility. Those were a standard in there. But if you look inside that plane, we come back from a trip from Nam, and they go in and they tear out a whole system. Almost all of your planes like that, the black boxes that were put in with wire nuts and strap. That's all, because within 3 or 4 weeks, that was obsolete. They'd have to pull that stuff out, because what we were doing over there when we were in GOTs was listening and reacting to what they were doing. And they knew what we were doing. And so they'd be pulling their boxes out, trying to get into what we were doing and trying to cloud what they were doing so we wouldn't know. So all of that stuff.
It's a cat and mouse game.
Yeah. I've told the story to Erik before, and the level of the cat and mouse was elevated, because when we were GOT, well, even when we were SOJs, we lost a plane. We lost a plane over there, and that was we were listening to what the Korean Peninsula was doing at that time, and one of our planes. I don't know if you guys remember the Pueblo incident. Mm-hmm. Pueblo incident had to do with Bucher, and he being his boat being captured by the North Koreans, put into a tremendous amount of time, torture, because of their reconnaissance. Well, they were in the water. We were in the air. We were doing the same thing. And they call it a disappearance of a plane, but everybody kind of understands what happens. Those type of incidences both relate back to the amount of stuff that we have in there and how we were pulling it in and out on a weekly basis to try to improve our ability to give us the best edge we know, whatever operation was going on down below. They knew it, we knew it. Whenever they had what they call bandits wet in the Gulf, bandits wet meant that they had MiGs over water. MiGs over water, they're not supporting any ground action. They're coming after us. That was the primary reason. And I, being in the radio spot, picked that up one time, bandits wet. Well, when they do, whatever aircraft carrier was down below, they had 2 planes that were at the ready. They were on the launch pads. As soon as it's bandits wet, they'd launch those 2. We'd drop from 10,000 feet to 500 feet, and the aircraft carriers' planes would then intercept the bandits. That happened once. And again, it reinforces, I go back to Vince. He had the inception to see that was going to be what position he was going to be in. And so he melted himself to be part of that. That's that is the mindset you have to have when you're up there. It can be very tense, but SOJs were tense. Flying the Foons, extremely tense. But you find that the people who look at that and do that are people who eventually end up trying to, Erik's told me many times, he says, "You're not going to retire, Dad. You still run around with your hair on fire doing something." And I think that's just part of what you do.
So you think that you picked that up somewhere along the Navy? I mean, that intensity, that focus, or was that part of you?
I think it's part of what Mom and Dad, they were both driven to be, if they were in something, they were driven to be the best they could be in that instance. Mm-hmm. And they didn't do that for self-acclamation. It's just that their parents, I think when your parents, anybody's parents, try to instill in kids and in what you want to have as a model going forward, the better qualities that are out there.
Mm-hmm. What did you? So you flew. Let's talk about the airplane you flew. The ship you flew. It was a Constellation. That's a Lockheed. It was Is it the C1? It was at 130. How did the Navy call it? Was it a 130?
It was called a C-123, 121.
121. Okay.
121, and the configuration of that is with the radar domes on the top and bottom.
Okay.
They're either called ECs or WCs, which refer to electronic surveillance or weather reconnaissance.
Okay.
And I flew both of those. Well, I flew all three of them.
Okay.
I flew in all three of them because the radioman basically had the same comm nav. The other people aboard were the experts in maintaining the systems that they had in the back.
Okay.
The CICO, the Combat Information Officer, that had all of there were just different radar sets back there. And you could go back, I did at times go back there and put on a headset and listen to the blips. I never, listening to blips was one thing, but listening to the language, I never got into that. We'd have people come aboard on every mission, spooks. We call them spooks. And they'd come out of ComNav Center in the morning, and when you're getting all the plane all set up, these guys would walk in, you know, I mean, they didn't just walk in, but they were assigned to your flight, and they'd go in the back, and they'd be listening to the voice. And yeah, those guys, that system, there are other electronic specialists aboard that if something went with that, then they'd repair that.
And the spooks would be the guys listening for reconnaissance and could speak the language and would know what's being said.
Right.
Was there anything spooky about them, or were they just one of the guys?
Just they're always to themselves.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be up on flight for, like I said, sometimes 14 to 18 hours, and they'd never hardly come out of that back part of that plane. They'd just always be back there messing around. You'd have eats and whatnot up there. You'd have a lunch or something, and they just didn't. The crew that consisted of the pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, radioman, electronic crew chief. There's about 8 or 10 of us. The rest 24 were people. The AGs, which we picked up when we flew Foons, they're another part that came aboard, and when we dropped the sonobuoys down there, they got that information. But we, as the electronic people, understood the plane's internal. Those other guys,
right,
their specialties.
They're flying for the mission. You're flying, making sure the plane
flies.
Yeah, you're going to keep it up in the air so they can do their job.
Right. We had our guys aboard that understood the blips, and they were back at the CICO Center. Those guys were part of our crew, but the spooks that came aboard with the voice.
How big is this plane? Like, give me an idea for just people who have never been on it.
Well, it could hold a crew of about 32.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was big. It was nothing like, I mean, the pilot and the co-pilot and the flight engineer were in a space that was about that wide by about, by 5 by 7, really cramped. My space back there was just about like what your table is, and it had all the electronics around there, and then the fuse panel down the side. And one of the responsibilities I was held accountable for was the electronics for the whole aircraft. In other words, well, as an example, we had a Buffalo, we had a B-52. They called them Buffalo Hunters, or Sky King. It had to land in Da Nang, and they put it in the revetment next to us, that was kind of cool, but not so cool, because it didn't take them long. They found out that there was a B-52, and so they started shelling us.
Okay.
And they were shelling us one time, and I was on a post flight, and we had all the guys, and then we're dinking around and chasing electrons. And they hit us. Well, my responsibility before I leave the aircraft is making sure that everybody's off the aircraft and that it's secured. In other words, all of the electronics is shut down, and so there can't be a fire start afterwards. Say a couple of guys left, and you had a couple of wires crossed, so you make sure the power is secured. So I started hitting us, and I remember I was down underneath the power panel. I was chasing some type of problem, and they started hitting us, and they started yelling, so everybody shut their stuff down. And I crawled up out of the hole, And I went to the power panel, and I made sure that all the power was secured. And I looked around, and everybody was gone. Well, then I booked to the back of the plane, and there was this ladder that come down. And when I got to the back of the plane, to the ladder, they hit over there. Well, it blew up, and nothing happened to me, but all the dirt and crapola came around me. Well, I ran through that cloud of stuff, and I got to the bunker. And when I got into the bunker, I was going like this. Well, the other guys had got there earlier, and they're counting heads, and they said, Jesus, where's the holy at? And I come strolling in there, and they said, are you hit? Are you hit? You know, I was going like this, and I said, that's just the dirt in my hair. But that was just one of the responsibilities that I had. You were asking about the responsibilities. Basically, I think the amount of responsibility I had was pretty equal to everybody. You know, everybody had a lot of responsibility in those, and that's a pretty good sized piece of metal that the United States government allows you to mess around with. So it's
right. What's the? Let's talk about the missions.
Yeah.
Foons, SOJ.
Yeah.
And GOTs. Let's define them, and let's talk about what this means, because I one of the goals of this project is to give people an idea just at how expansive the war was. Not that there were a lot of people doing a lot of different things. It wasn't just all people with guns and jungles, although that's not a knock on it, and it's certainly not there certainly were people, but there's people doing all kinds of stuff, and so I'm interested in what you were doing.
Okay, I'll go from the part that leads to the Gulf at the end.
Okay.
SOJs meant Foons, Typhoons.
Mm-hmm.
We flew Typhoons, weather reconnaissance. We'd pick them up. Hickam would tell us about a formation from Hawaii. Would tell us about formations, and they would radio us. Who the commander would assign a crew to that Typhoon, and you would fly it, probably 10 to 12 days, depending upon which way it went. And if it went north, you went up and flew out of Okinawa and then out of Japan. If you went south, you flew out of the Philippines, and eventually it ended up down in Malaysia somewhere. So those were two different ways you'd go. We had two different sources of information. We penetrated 1,000 feet, and then it was pretty unique. You catch a feeder band, and as I was saying before, you go in at 11 degrees off the port wing, and you crab all the way in. And then when you pop through the wall cloud, you're rough going in. When you hit into that eye of the Typhoon, it's just calm. And I have some pictures. I don't know if I've ever showed all to Bud, but it's just beautiful high white clouds and going all the way up. And then you'd circle, come up, and then you pop back out at 10,000 feet. That was what we did. The Air Force and ours were nighttime penetrations. For whatever reason, that was how they designed it.
So you were flying, just to be clear, you were flying into Typhoons at night. At night.
Yeah.
Sounds like safe work.
Yeah. I'm not saying that I was the smartest guy.
And you probably didn't have a lot of choice. I understand how the military. I've done enough of these interviews, but that's pretty amazing. So then what was the other? Sorry, I didn't mean
the Air Force, and they penetrated with a C-130. And the reason why we went in at lower, because as you can see that airplane, it had a long wing with very flexible. And where I sat was right off the window off the port wing, and there's a little porthole there. And so I could look right out. As a matter of fact, if you want to get out and work on the wing, you went right past my place. You'd pull out that porthole, and you walk out and do the fueling and then walk back. And so I could see the wings out there, and they were doing a lot of this. And I'm thinking, my God, it's going to... Well, that was designed that way. It's designed to accept that energy. So if it was a stiff wing, it would snap. But it didn't. It was flexible. And so that's part of the reason why they chose that type of airplane for the low-level penetration. The Air Force, on the other hand, I think it was a C-130 Hercules that they popped in at the top. They popped in at 10,000 feet. And they again took their reconnaissance. And to give you some idea, we hit Typhoon Olive, which was 105 knotter, and it diverted off Okinawa and went up. And there were some kids from Japan that were Mount Fuji on a Boy Scout exploration, and we told them, to get off. They didn't. They lost 5 kids on that, which brought to home, what we were doing, because I always was focused, like everyone would think, about GOTs, how we're. But that was an important part, flying foons. It gave some people advance warning, and it really gave you a sense of accomplishment.
So yeah, you weren't just and that's an important point, I think, is that these missions weren't just necessarily war related, but they did have important life and death importance, much like. So your goal was to try to track, predict, and warn, kind of an early warning system.
Early warning. That's what we were.
And also, I imagine some study of behavior of typhoons.
It did, because towards the end of time I was there, I re-upped there. You have two tours, 2 18-month tours, and I took both of mine with the same squadron. I think because I enjoyed the accomplishment it gave me, and whatever I did that. But I think when you think about the typhoons and what they represented a field of study. And towards the end of my time when I was there, I think they were becoming more and more adept at figuring them out, because we started not to fly as many foons. We'd say, hey, what the heck? Well, there's a foon coming by. They already had it tracked because of the information we had gathered. Not just us, but I mean the squadron, that they didn't necessarily need to do that, which is cool.
We don't have a lot of typhoons in Laurel, Montana.
No.
Was that kind of interesting for a Montana landlocked kid? You're flying over tropical sea storms.
That scared bejesus out of me.
Really?
To this day, the reason why I didn't want to fly is because I was afraid of boats. I was afraid, what happens if you were in a boat and you were over, what do you do? So I did not like boats, joined the Navy, did not like boats. But I really enjoyed flying. I think it's another one of those things where you just try and do something that's kind of unique, and it was exciting.
When you're going into something like a typhoon, did you ever worry that you weren't going to come out, or did it get hairy? Because it seems like that you're going into something, you're moving at what, 200 knots ish, I imagine, but you're also moving in something that can go 100 to 150 knots.
Right.
That's pretty intense.
That's awful intense. Yeah, there were times when you felt like you didn't want to be where you're at.
Okay.
But on the other thing, you're young. You do what it's a thrill thing. I think a couple of times I was kind of had anxieties about what I was doing.
Okay.
But I never had that in the back of my head when I got on the plane, that something was going to go sideways and I was going to end up in a problem that I couldn't figure a way out of.
So there was some apprehension, but it wasn't an overriding one.
Yeah, when you're young, you do that. You do things that are stupid to the common guy, but on the other hand, give it to the Navy. They had us, our crew, pretty much focused on what we were doing and the reason we were doing it, and why you do it the way they're supposed to do it, because we're going to bring you back home. But yeah, I a couple times I was apprehensive, but
any particular one stand out to you?
Well, that 105 knotter, the thing that stood out to me is that foon killed those 5 kids. That did, and that didn't get to me until I was back on the ground and we read in the paper about those kids up on Mount Fuji. It just
yeah. What is when you're okay? So when you're going into to something like a typhoon, and you're the radio guy, do you have any contact, or do you go? Is the storm turbulent enough? Can you make contact with anybody, or do you go into okay? So you can still communicate with folks on the outside.
Yeah, I sat on one side of the plane right here. Right next to me was the navigator. Good guys.
Great guys.
Yeah. And every hour we'd have to report back. You know, so he'd draw out his plot, and then he'd give me the message. Well, he'd draw out the plot. I'd take that, I'd take it up to the commander, aircraft commander. He'd say, "Yep," and then he'd bring it back. And as long as he had a stamp on it, I could send it. I just couldn't send anything without that approval. And then he'd send it out. So all that type of stuff that the airplane was in regards to that, you know, I sent it out. The AGs would come back and they'd have a great big long commutative numbered system, and I would get a hold of Anderson Air Force Base and put that out.
Okay. Was that crypto or was that?
It was in numbers, but it wasn't. It was crypto had a KY28, which is a device that scrambled words.
Okay.
And that was only used at GOTs.
Okay.
So we didn't use that, but it was there were numbers. In other words, if it was a 7535, then that indicated the density and the altitude of the cumulus clouds. It was just as an example. Okay. And so instead of saying all that, they would just put it in numbers, and whichever number in sequence meant this particular bit of information. So I was responsible for that.
Okay. Let's talk about GOTs and SOJs.
SOJs was Sea Japan. You flew out of Atsugi, Japan. That was something nobody ever talked about. Nobody ever said much about it. You know, we lost one plane about that, and nobody knew about that stuff.
Because this was all recon, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was just, it was intense, but it was just what it was.
So you would fly, were GOTs like SOJs insofar? Are you listening for the same things, kind of doing the same things?
On my part, what I did was just calm down.
Right, yeah.
Now, those people in the back, they were highly trained in their area of expertise. So I'm sure that the SOJ guys had their point of interest that may have been different from the GOT guys. I'm almost certain of that.
And GOT stands Gulf of Tonkin.
Yeah,
so
right.
they're listening, and they're listening. You guys are flying patterns. You're listening for radio. You're doing whatever with the equipment you've got on board. This is basically reconnaissance or spying, trying to get information from the enemy. Correct? Right.
It was often said, phantoms, which are F4s. Those pilots and RO, radio information officers, the guy who sat in the back. It was said to us that if you ever walked into a bar and there was a phantom crew in there, you wouldn't buy a drink. We identified firepower from the ground in vectors. If they were flying missions and we had a hot vector, they'd broadcast that. They'd veer out of that. Example of that was May 16th. I've told Bud about this a couple times. May 16th of 72, we went up and hit Haiphong Harbor above the DMZ. And I remember going out on that call, and we were busy back there. And I didn't have a headset on. I was just at that was one of those missions. We didn't mess around. There was no getting up and having a cup of coffee. You were at your station, and you're at your station for about 10 hours. And the main battle was bombing Haiphong Harbor. And those guys went in, and you could see it into the distance of all that was going on. And you could see the response, some of those missiles coming up to get the planes. And we had the ability to identify the vectors of these missiles. And so as soon as we sensed that one of those was being launched, we call a hot vector. And those pilots in those F4s would see what we were saying, they'd veer off. And it's just like what they said. It'd be like telephone poles coming up, and there'd be explosions. that was part of one of the things that we did that allowed us to, or that we did one of our missions. The voice was very important because we intercepted a lot of the communications, how they're going to act. But I think the vectoring and the identifying of hot zones was pretty critical. At that point, it was very
so
critical.
you were basically supporting combat insofar as you're telling where the missiles were coming from, and also just identifying where the action is, because you could listen, you were picking up radio, so there was a lot of information that was flowing through your airship.
Gives you some idea why they had the two hot planes on the flat top for us.
Right.
We were pretty vital.
Yeah, and were you vulnerable too? I mean, if one of those MiGs would have decided to, I mean, I'm assuming that that MiGs can fly faster, and
we when we were on track, we were on track at 140 knots.
Okay.
And you'd have these Phantoms come up beside us, and they'd put on their air brakes and drop their landing gear to go slow enough, and they'd take pictures of us. And we'd be balls to the wall just trying to keep up with them, you know. So we were not elusive, and we were not very crafty.
Right.
We were just up there. We weren't very fast.
You said DMZ? Was that, were you
Demilitarized zone?
Yeah, in Vietnam or in, okay.
Yeah. So you'd fly north. You'd fly above the fence, or over the
oh
fence.
no, yeah, that night we did.
Okay.
Normally we didn't. We just fly it up in the Gulf. Yeah.
Okay. And when you tell me when you were doing GOTs, were you stationed in Da Nang, or where did you
right out of Da Nang.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's so you'd go up for anywhere, I'm guessing 10 to 18 hours a day,
right?
And just fly. You'd just be flying these routes, right?
Yeah, right.
But let's talk about what was Da Nang like. What do you remember of Da Nang?
Never got out of the air base. At that time, it was locked down. The only thing that, we got, in reading a couple of other things, he talked about the mamasons and the papasons that were there. And we had gals in our barracks. We found one that was stepping off. I told Erik that story of them stepping off. They would step off from the fence to our barracks, and then because they knew the distance between the fence and whatever they're shooting with, and they found one that did that, which was kind of unnerving. You know, we had our hut hit one time. The radium, which would have been me if it had been my turn to be over there, was hit. He got shrapnel. The desk commander got some shrapnel. So there's a couple of incidences there where it was close. We got Da Nang itself got hit by friendly fire twice when I was there. Once it hit the Air Force side and killed 3 airmen. And somehow the TACAM, which gives you the DME, the distance mean equivalent between whatever you're transponding and your receiver. And so they locked on it, and they thought they were locking on a target. And somehow they, being the other side, had manipulated that. And, you know, when they're up so high, so they bombed us. It was like noon. And I can still remember going to chow line, and we got hit, and I kissed the concrete so hard I thought it was that, you know, we'd get hit a lot at night.
Okay.
That's all the time you ever got hit. Getting hit in the daytime like that, that kind of unnerved me.
Yeah.
That was not good. And then the other time, it was the Air Force again hit us, and it was like 7 o'clock in the morning. Okay. And I told Erik about that. They hit us. It was our guys. And I just got done shaving, and it hit, and I cut myself right here. And, you know, when you get hit like that, your focus is not, it's directed somewhere else. And so I still had shaving cream on. I ran to and I got there, and people were kind of looking at me kind of funny, and I thought, oh Christ, I got this shaving cream on me, so I went to go like this, and my hand came up with blood, and blood was coming down there. Well, they thought that I was hit. So you're hit.
You've been hit. You've been hit.
I caught myself.
You've been hit with your own razor.
Yeah. But,
wow. How do you sleep in a place where at night when you're getting mortar?
I've told Erik all these stories. I feel funny about it, but
that's okay. You can tell me I'm a new audience.
Marty Rule and Les Rohr, those two guys came in together, and they spent one tour with us, so I knew them quite well. They're both great guys. And Marty got married, and so he was getting to be a little bit more aware of his surroundings than the rest of us knotheads. We just went around doing stuff. And it got close to him getting out. And I can still remember this to this day. We'd sleep in these bunk beds in the barracks. And we were on the second floor. And wooden floor barracks. And, you always got up and ran when they bombed you. Ran down to the hooch. Well, when Phantoms take off, when you're there for a long time, you can tell the difference between a Phantom hitting his afterburners and being shelled. You can just sense it, and they did that a lot. And after a while, you just sleep through it. Well, I could tell when a couple of Phantoms took off. Well, Marty thought it was not. It was being shelled. Well, he was sleeping with his boots on. He jumped out of his top rack and hit the doggone floor, all the way down the steps. And of course, everybody else is thinking, this is not.
This is not anything.
No. And about 5 minutes later, here come old Marty,
kind of
sneaking up, sneaking up and crawl back in the rack. But that Tenang was not. Just before I got in there were some guys that got to go to the beach. And we couldn't. They secured us, so we weren't allowed to go around and do much of any sightseeing, if you call that, or interacting. The only interacting we had with the general populace was the Mama Sons and Papa Sons, who served the role as being either a compartment cleaner or something like that.
Right. What do you? When you're over there, what do you know about, like, when you enlisted in 1969, the war, I just happen to know the war had about a 35-40% approval rating in the general public. What is the perception of what's going on at home when you're over in Vietnam, and what role does that play?
Well, I was fortunate. My mom and dad supported me no matter what I was doing. So they were always very, very supportive. Whether or not they had a real like or dislike for why we were over there, they never conveyed that to me. I think they thought I had too much on my plate. They didn't need to have them telling me what they thought. So I don't know much about what of the other stuff that was going on. To be quite honest with you. I was pretty filled up with my time with what I was doing. Once in a while, you get the Stars and Stripes. That was a very, very slanted paper, and it would give you the idea of what we're doing. You didn't pick up the Gazette over there and find out what.
We had pulled out of Saigon earlier.
Yeah, the correspondent wasn't there at that desk, but. I just don't remember. Yeah. I remember protesting about what I was doing over there, and as odd as it may seem, I by that time had taken sides and says, well, I think I'm doing something good. And so I defended what I thought was what we were doing. In retrospect, looking back, I have a lot more thought about how much it takes to go to war and how much more stuff that we should be looking at rather than using that as one of our tools. So I think I've danced around that question a lot in my own mind, and I'm still I still have reservations about what we were doing over there, but I still have a bit of accomplishment in my mind of what I did.
Yeah. So there's what I'm hearing is there's a little bit of dissonance there. I mean,
Both ways. Yeah.
How were you, right when you got back to the States immediately, how were you greeted, in that first step on U.S. soil?
I don't know if I've ever told you, Bud,
No.
I got discharged in Guam
okay.
because I had intentions of staying in Guam. I said, what the heck? Nice island,
Good beach?
good beach, yeah, nice people. But after about a month of that, I couldn't.
Right.
So I hopped on a plane and came back in civilian clothes,
Okay.
not looking like a military guy. I came home on leave a couple times with my military on. Nobody ever said anything to me one way or another. I know one time when I got home, it was in January, I think around Christmas, December around Christmas. And I got out Logan, and there was nobody there, of course. And I called Mom and Dad, and they come to pick me up, but they hadn't gotten there quick enough. And I walked out, and I looked across the parking lot, and it was about 4 inches of snow. And there was a jackrabbit out there, and he was hopping along. And I said, by God, I'm home. Because that meant more to me. A lot of guys, you meet a lot of guys in there who couldn't understand what the hell you were doing in Montana. What is it about Montana? I mean, there are guys who says, you got everything you want to do in these other places. And I just, so I was never treated. I got into a verbal confrontation with a neighborhood guy that I was in the bar with one time. I don't know if I ever told you about that guy. But we got each other's face about what we were doing. He was very much convinced that we were doing something wrong. And, of course, I was all full of myself. We were doing something right. And at the end, he ended up buying me a beer. But, I never looked at that guy the same after that, and I know he didn't to me. But it's too bad that some of those things that happened over there at that time happened the way they did. Animosity-wise, you look at what people are coming back now as what we did. I think that's part of the reason why you guys decided to do this, because there was a recognition that irregardless of what we decided was right or wrong, people answered the bell for whatever reason. Some guys answered the bell because they were told to answer the bell, but they still answered the bell. That's irregardless. Some of them answered the bell against it as COs, and they still, answered the bell. They went over and did what their part was, and yet when they came back, they didn't find any sense of people's support, and I think that's really too bad.
Did you feel a lack of support when you got home?
I felt. Erik knows this. I have a real sense of family, and I have friends, but family is really important to me, and I've instilled that hopefully in Bud. But family was very supportive. And nobody in my family, I had 20 cousins. Nobody in my family got in my face. Nobody said anything about why or what. I never, other than that one fella, and reading about it, because Laurel, Montana, my goodness, it's not the center of any
It's not Berkeley.
No. I had a cousin who I think he ended up being, I think, more in the vein of Doug, more in the vein of being a person who wouldn't support it, but he never once said anything to me. So I think I was sheltered, and I don't know why.
Yeah. What did you miss most? Speaking of being from Montana.
Yeah.
Guam, the Philippines, Sea of Japan, long way away from Laurel, Montana.
Yeah.
What did you miss when you were gone from it?
Montana.
Yeah?
Yeah. Geez, you're fortunate. get in an outfit and go someplace where you're completely on your own. And you know, I hunt a lot. I used to hunt a lot. And you go up on a knob and you look over and you see a tree over there across the canyon. And you might have walked by that tree maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, and that thing was this big around. And now when you look over at it, and it's like that. And so that puts you about like that. And so in the grand scheme of things, you realize that you're just a small little thing in a great big whatever's going on. And it gives you a sense that, yeah, there's tranquility and serenity there. It really, really makes me feel. I never got that. I was in Tokyo a lot. Not a lot, but quite a bit. And you go there and you walk on where the Ginza's at in Tokyo, and you'd see all these, just people. Everywhere you go, there was people doing whatever people do over there. I was so claustrophobic. You just can't. You know, there's I mean, people grow up that way and they have no way. If you put them in Montana, maybe they might go a little nutso because they don't have. It's so
yeah. It's so it feels so lonely, empty.
Yeah, but
that's part of the
but Montana is, and there is no other place. I've been to a lot of places. Now there's some other places I'm sure that are nice. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
According to Eric, Washington's pretty nice.
Yeah.
But you know, that's
according to Eric. Yeah. I like how he made sure to
qualifies that.
Right.
Yeah.
What about let's talk a little bit about what's Vietnam look like from a plane. What were your thoughts? Because you kind of got a different perspective.
Yeah. When you're up in the air, it's just inside the plane. And when you take off, you just see mountains and jungles and stuff. But give you some kind of a sense of what it was like. Da Nang was the busiest airport in the world. Mm-hmm. So when you're getting ready to take off, the radioman is responsible for the communications between the pilot and tower. And so you have your headset on, and you're listening to make sure that the pilot has all of his tools. And you notice around you, because you have a porthole here, what's going on around you. And you figure out when your line is to take off, because you're in a line. You just don't take off. You just don't taxi up and take off. And there might be 20 or 30 aircraft, and so you're on the ground waiting for half hour, 45 minutes. And you just see all of these different kind of aircraft they all have a mission just like you do. And they're all doing something. And one of them that really was kind of neat, they had these old spats, what we call spats. And if you have a vision in your mind of an aircraft that had a canopy that you pulled over, like the old, that's what these guys were. They're called AD-1s, spats. And they had twin guns on them, machine guns. And they're called in because they flew slow. So if they're going to spray a field, they could take their time and really concentrate their firepower. And these guys were nuts anyway because they flew slow. I mean,
right.
These guys are
slow with guns equals target.
And I thought I was dumb. But these guys are kind of cool. And there was two guys, and I don't know if they're the same two guys. I just get the impression that they were. And they had scarves. No kidding. One was a red and black scarf, one was a yellow and black scarf. And they had them flying out. And I mean, they're that little far back with a single prop up front. And that scarf was sitting back there. And they would be talking to tower, getting ready to go. And when they're cleared to take off, they'd grab that scarf, pull it in, and they'd shut that door and they'd take off. And I remember that. I remember that being one of the unique things of Da Nang. The other part was, one time we were getting ready to take off, and we stalled on the runway, and I couldn't figure out how come we were stalled. And we got hit pretty hard that night before. Well, it had to have been during that time when that B-52 was there, and somebody had missed, and it was a shell that was laid on the runway, unexploded ordnance that came in, and we spotted it. We got it. I can't believe it. All that aircraft, we spotted it. And they had to have an ordnance truck come out there and get that. But the climate, open a bag of potato chips as crisp as you thought they would be inside that bag, they were soggy in 10 minutes. If you had a can of pop or a can of beer, you'd set it there and the water would just run off of it, condensation. The sheets, you couldn't sleep at night because they were wet in the morning. I never did really get comfortable with the humidity over there. I never liked it. I can remember one time when I was walking from the barracks on Guam to the hangar, and the hangar was open on both sides. So I walked to the hangar one way, and I looked through the hangar about another 100 feet apart or away, and it was a wall of water from a storm that came through, and yet it drenched that one side of the hangar, and I walked in, it was dry. And so storms came through with pretty good intensity and dropped a lot of water, and then it was done.
When you were over there, was there ever a time when they started shooting at you and you thought, we're going to get hit?
The only time I really was extremely nervous was during a TET, and Wei and Quang Tri were run over. And they came by, and when I was in the service, I grew up hunting, so I knew what a gun was, and not a problem. But there's a lot of those guys over there that not so much. And they came through and started giving our guys rifles and flak jackets and helmets. And I got a little uneasy about that. Not so much. I don't know about trust those guys.
Well, and I guess you had seen your base bombed twice by us.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what size of gun. Sometimes which is a good point about war.
Yeah. But all humor aside, that was the time when I probably was a little older. I felt some anxiety because what are you going to do when and if they get to the fence? What are you going to do? Because they have shown the propensity to just to march right into a base and take it over. So there was a little nervousness at that time.
Did any of that anxiety remain with you after you'd come home? Having gone through, being tense about, bombing.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, Bud. I can remember when I was home. Well, a couple of different stories I can relate to it. For whatever reason, there was a loud noise at the house, and I bolted out of my bed at my parents' house and was at the door when I finally realized that it was, I was just like old Marty. I keep laughing at him, but for whatever reason, that triggered that. And then when I was in the fire department, we'd set off, those. Now they do it electronically, and they did that because of what happened when I was there. We had a guy set it off like we used to with a fusee, just light it and roll. Well, I let it roll, and then Bob Cassidy lit his. Well, when he lit it, it didn't blow up; it blew out. And I can remember running over and rolling him over, and there was blood. It kind of spooked me. But anyway, before I could do that, before I could light my first fuse, I had some anxieties because as much as you laugh and giggle about what happened over there, it became apparent to me. I had thoughts after I came back, whenever the ground would do that, it'd bring up some feelings in there that you didn't think you had, that you didn't bother you, but it did, and I think that's normal. I mean, you're not conditioned not to respond to a certain stimulus, and that's one of them that obviously. However far down I push that there is some type of
yeah, and you lived in that. You did too. I mean, you were over in that environment for a while.
Yeah.
Right? You did two
tours. Yeah.
Right. So you just can't not.
You can't.
It's weird. That's not an everyday. You know, one of the things that has struck me about conversation is what passed for normal for every day over there. If this happened to probably Erik or I on a day, that would be a story. Just one day we would tell it for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
What were there happy times over in Vietnam? Were there fun? I mean, I don't want to say fun because it makes it sound like you went to Disneyland instead of Vietnam. Good times, happy memories.
Well, yeah, there were you know, every time that you have an instance where guys you get together, you do things and you laugh about them. One of the things that, and it was not fun for anybody, but it was a fun story.
We
had a guy by the name of Prinky, who was a guy from Iowa, big guy, ruddy complected, big guy. And he was ground support. He never flew. He was just always there, and he was stationed in Da Nang in our company. And we had a place at our little hooch where we had a bar set up, and we had what they call an AC-doocy table. You know, you dice and you play AC-doocy. And he was sitting at the table having a beer, and they hit that night. And 122 came, it was a big rocket, came through the door and landed right at his feet, stuck in the ground right there. And it didn't go off, of course. And, you know, Prinky, you know, he was kind of a big clowny type guy anyway. And he jumped back, and he was, like I say, he was ruddy complected. Well, I came into my tour, my det over there about 3 or 4 days after that, and he was a wreck.
Right. A bomb landed or a mortar landed at his feet. I can understand.
Imagine why.
Yeah.
122 landed right at your feet.
Yeah, we kept that behind the bar for about a couple of months.
Okay.
Until somebody finally said, "You can't do that." and they came in and they got it, and they said they'd bring it back, you know, after they took it apart and made it safe, but it never...
It never crossed your mind
No.
that this thing could go off at any moment.
It didn't go off then. But no.
It would have ruined a lot of very mediocre beer.
Yeah. That was fun only because of nothing happened.
Yeah.
Nothing happened. If when they hit our quarters, you know, there were some funny instances there where guys were scrambling, and there was a commander under the table, and one of the airmen, which is like a commander is like an 04 or 05, and the airman is an E3, and that's quite a bit of...
Right.
And airman told the commander to get the hell out of that place because he was trying to hide, you know.
Right.
and the commander said, "The hell is here first?" so you know, but those stories come out after everybody finds out that everybody's okay. You know, I was really fortunate. I saw more tragedy uphand with Gore being in the fire department and dealing with that. And so you look at what a lot of our guys do nowadays, our first responders that do the work that they do, and they take it home on a daily basis. And what they go through, those people like that are really, thankfully they're given their due regard, but they have taken upon themselves to put themselves in harm's way and do the things that they do. We never had anybody get killed. The guy that we had a plane wreck in Da Nang, a Papa Romeo, and the plane was designed to break in 3 parts. And where I sit was in the wings, and that's designed to, you know, to be one of the safest places. And he was pretty safe, but it spun and threw he and his chair out, and he hit a telephone pole and died. So. That crew, I didn't know anybody on that crew, and it didn't happen when I was there. It happened a year or 2 before that. So I never was with any real tragedy like that. Like I said, the kids on Mount Fuji was bad, in Da Nang, and in that, just I knew I can tell you one story. I got there in Da Nang, and Charlie Company, Marines, they loaded them up every morning, and they got in the back of their 6x6 and they took off, and they went up to Happy Valley. And I'm the kind of guy to say hi, how you doing, and what like this. And can't remember who it was, says don't say hi to those guys. I said, what the hell? Well, how come not? He says, well, because when they come back, they may not all come back, and we don't need to have you worried about what you make a relationship with somebody like that. So, yeah, you did, and you saw those guys in their faces, because the ones that were there for a while, you didn't say much to those people. You didn't. They had a look on their face that you knew it was, they were not always going to be happy at the end of the day for some of those guys.
Yeah.
So that brought it back home pretty fast.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think Vietnam was a good thing for you?
It was what it was. I have some regrets in the fact that it didn't leave a lot of good for a lot of people. It didn't. It didn't resolve. It didn't bring us to a conclusion. And it's sad because for all of what we did, there was no answer brought forward, like a lot of conflicts. It seems like a lot of conflicts anymore are not brought to a resolve.
Right. There's not a win-loss.
No, there
it's
isn't.
Done.
Yeah. As far as it being an important part of my life, it probably shaped me a little bit more than what I'd like to admit. A lot of times when I become in a tight place, I try to find the humor to combat what you got to go through, so that you don't get lost in your thought. So that part probably shaped me more than anything, because I look back what I went through. Just a lot of stress,
mm-hmm.
A lot of things I think Bud can kind of contest to that, or attest to that. He can test me a lot.
Right, yeah, that's what fathers and sons do best, test.
Yeah, but he can probably verify that when I get when things get kind of rocky, I kind of like to get to the humor of things, and I think that's my defense mechanism. Mm-hmm. That's probably a result, because what can you do?
Yeah, what could you do? You were where you were, what you were doing.
What you were doing, and trying to do it the best you could. So yeah, it's kind of a shaping. Every person, Erik went through Missoula. How did that? I'm still wondering how the heck he got through that. But there's certain things that he did, and at the impressionable stage of his life, that are hanging with him long after anything else happens to him. So you put two or three things together. You put a person of an impressionable age in an environment that's going to be highly volatile, and that's going to have an impact. I don't know of any other way, and it impacted me. Sometimes I still wonder.
Along those same lines, you talked about the fire department. Obviously, you got involved because so much of our family,
mm-hmm. Right.
Was involved in that, and I would say city government the same way.
Yeah.
But in what sense did your experiences, particularly volunteering, to go to Vietnam, mm-hmm. did that sort of set your life toward a life of volunteerism and being involved in the community that way?
Yeah, it's what I was brought up to. I volunteer on a lot of different things. I think that the parents are that way, and whenever they volunteered, they did it. They took on every job so that they try to do the best they could be, and so that, more than likely, it calls them to the top of whatever program they're with. And so volunteering is I go back to Erik doesn't like to have me refer to to G.W. Bush very much, but he had a thing that I think stands out as American as anything, and that's point of light, the 1,000 points of light. I think that's one of the things that Americans have that nobody has really been able to quantify. How many countries are built on the fact that you volunteer, and not volunteer for your family or anything, volunteer for the good of the group, and that's one of the things I think that's highly overlooked. Because without those points of light, I don't think you'd have the continuity that it takes to keep the country together. Is that what you were?
Was there a reason? I want to take that just a little farther. Is there a reason that, some of the guys who come back from, say, being an MP go into a police force, and did it seem a natural progression for you to have served time in the military and then go right into something like the fire department? There's on call. You don't know what you're going to. It seems like there's a similar mindset that the military might have been good training for that, or maybe even I would think adrenaline.
Yeah, well, from the time that I was in the service till about 3 years ago, I was on call all the time. I was on call all the time when I was in the service. I was on call for the fire department, and then I was on call being mayor. I had a responsibility that was 24/7. So a lot of people say, "Well, what are you doing with your life now that you retired?" And my standard answer is, "Whatever the goddamn I want to do." For the first time in my life.
Right. It's wonderful. I'm sorry it took it this long.
Yeah.
Right?
And they say, "Aren't you bored?" And I said, "Well, I've got stuff that I'm doing. And part of the stuff I'm doing is nothing."
Right.
Thank you much. But, would one go into the other? I think it was from the time I was a kid and saw what my parents did and how they volunteered, and then it evolved into the service. And a service, I think, I think I was channeled that way. I just think, I don't know how the service would have helped or hindered me. I think I had knowing your grandmother, like I know her, she was very determined in what she did. Dad was the same way, and they didn't necessarily sit down and say this. They did it by example, and I think everybody does. I think your folks, and hopefully, well, there are times when I went over the top, but hopefully it was that way. You just try to by example.
How are you? We talked a little bit about when you'd come back, but as years have gone on, and it seems like the fog of Vietnam, people have become more accepting, positive. I don't know what the right word is, but I mean they're not going out to spit on the soldiers. How have you been accepted, or how have you, by other veterans, or just kind of talk about how that's going? So I know you obviously you got involved in Legion, have been for a little while.
Right.
But you've said to me that wasn't always so easy to get involved with those groups.
We weren't accepted coming back.
Why?
American Legion or the VFW didn't accept us, and I don't know why it was. I think part of it was the fact that, and no fault, nothing. It's just what I think. American Legion was made up of people that were from the World War II, and they won the war. They were the winners. I can remember coming home, got into a discussion with your mother's
Grandpa.
uncles and
yeah.
That they were the winners, and you guys didn't win, and that puts you in a defensive mode right there. So if you're in a defensive mode, even though somebody comes by and offers you something to join that, you automatically step back and say, maybe not so much,
Mm-hmm.
But the a lot of the people who are in my boat, Vietnam vets, and to some degree, some of the other ones that weren't successful, they're not accepted, or not at that time. The Legion didn't reach out to me and say, "Hey, welcome back, veteran, join us." They never did. VFW is the same way, and that's, I'm not trying to deride those people. That was a sense of what they thought, and that's fine. But for me at that time, there was no call to come. I'd say about 5, 6, 7 8 years ago, there were people coming by, and I finally got there.
Did before that time, in between the time you got home and kind of 5 or 6 years ago, was Vietnam something you talked about with other vets? Did you even share that story? Was it part of, or was that on the back shelf somewhere?
Just didn't come up. Ghazi, he and I talk. He had the same problem that I did with the shells. He couldn't do that. I think I overcame it and was able to participate in that. But Ghazi and I talked a little bit. But other than that, no, not so much.
Are there things that either you, because you experienced over there, in talking with some of the veterans, there are either smells or sounds or sights or sounds, obviously, that almost instantly transport them back, that take them back, or that trip memories of. Are there things like that for you?
Yeah, the sounds, obviously, and once in a while I can't detect them, but there'll be times when I have a sense, just a sense, like you walk into like Yogi Berra's deja vu all over again. Something happens, and I don't know which senses are tripped, and you get that kind of a quiver inside you, thinking, Jesus, there's something ain't right.
Yeah.
Those, and it's usually around a stressful situation. I know when I was in the fire department, there'd be times after it's all over with, and you get a little shake, and I thought, boy, I haven't thought about that since I was over there, and you either got shelled or you heard some stuff. One of the things I can't get out of my head, I think about it now and again, is on the radio frequency. I don't know if I ever told you this, but on the radio frequency, there's a 500 megahertz. That's the emergency. And you set your radio up to whatever frequency you want, but the radio is designed to always have, if there's a transmission on that frequency, picks it up. And we were flying a GOT, and I was on the radio, and I was just listening, and pretty soon it broke in on the 500. And there's these guys that were down there, and they were in trouble. And they had a couple guys down, and they were trying to met them out. And they came in one time, and the helicopter said, they can't make it in again. And this other guy says, well, I'll be here. And then it went blank. And, that type of stuff there, it creeps in, and you feel, Jesus Christ, what the hell happened there? And you really become involved with that, and it just flushes you. Just whatever you had happen to you up until the point you thought about that was minuscule, because that what happened to that guy at that particular moment, that was the pinnacle of his life right there. And you were bastardized into being part of that. And that's part of that altar part that you don't want to take with you, but it happens. Right. And there's nobody. I swear to God, there is nobody that's over there that does not have that happen to them somehow. If they say no, they just haven't come to grips with it yet.
Yeah. What's the when you're over there and you're you see a lot, you hear a lot. Are there and now so much has been written on Vietnam, A lot of movies, a lot of television. You're over there on a great. Everybody talks about the great music that was happening during that period too. Are there movies that either do a good job, film does a good job portraying something that you think, yeah, they captured that kind of right from what I remember, or are there songs that take you back there that were kind of either anthems, or you said every time there's some guys who say every time I hear this song, I'm back there. We listened to that 4,533 times back there.
Yeah, I don't go to movies that are about Vietnam. I don't do it. Songs, I really I love music. I really do. There's not a lot of I love that period of music. Erik knows that. I got all the oldies going all the time, and, but it doesn't bring back so much that over there. I can't as much as those people say that like the Joan Baez and the Jane Fondas and those people. I can't wrap my arms around that yet, and that's just something that's there.
Yeah. Have you been back to Vietnam?
No.
Do you have any desire?
No.
Okay.
No.
Have you been to the Vietnam Wall?
No.
Okay. Is there any desire there? Okay. One of the reasons we want to do this project, I mean, 50 years, I've always said 50 years is an arbitrary time. It's marked by humans, and there's nothing more magical than there is about 49 or 51. But there's going to be a time coming in the future in which maybe the people who witnessed Vietnam aren't around anymore. Hopefully that's a long time in the distant future. But one of the things that we want to do is people to say, when you gave that jackrabbit on the snow at the airport, there's going to be future generations who are up at that airport and see a jackrabbit on the snow, and that will create a connection. You both saw something and you both felt the same way about a place. And I want people to hear about the Vietnam War from Montanans or people who have called this place home, so that they don't just read it from textbooks or military histories, which are all fun, or newspapers. Nothing wrong with writers.
They got
they got their crosses to bear too. What do we talked a little bit about what the war has kind of meant to you looking back, but going forward, what do you hope that people, when they go back to study Vietnam, will remember from a guy who was over there?
Well, I don't know. That's a pretty insightful question.
Well, thanks. I filled my quota for the month.
Go home now.
Yeah.
Clock out.
Right. Call this a wrap.
Yeah, it's a wrap. You know, mankind is going to be tested every time they decide to do something that's not canned and thought of as being the proper thing to do. And each time they're tested, they're gonna go about what they think is the proper thing to do. That's going to involve people on both sides of the issues thinking that they're right. And if you want to go by the philosophy that we have in the past, that the American way is always right, then you're going to have some situations where it's not going to be good. What I'd like to see us take out of the Vietnam experience is the fact that maybe at times we're not always right. Maybe there are times for us to be educated further, and so that we can get a perspective that will allow us to enable us to see what people think of in their world. You know, I don't think there'll ever be another America like there has been these first 200 years. We have something that's unique, and to fight for that fiber, I wholly support that. But I think that we also have to take what we've learned and try to utilize that and be able to say, this is what we are. And it's hard to put it into words, but try to learn. Try to get the experience and learn it. And it's going to be it's easy to say. It's a difficult road to travel. But I would hope that they would learn. Like we talked about, and Bud, you weren't there, but when we took a picture, we talked about this guy, this journalist who said, if you're put into a position to push the button looking at what you're going to create. If you're going to create a world of chaos, stand in that field and tell them that you're going to send those people into that abyss, if you'd be so blunt to say that, because you don't know once it starts what they've created.
Yeah.
But that's what I hope we go forward with, just being educated.
When you were over there, the communications, there was no FaceTime, there were no cell phones, there was none of the fun stuff that we have today. I'm guessing it was just letters. That's how you communicated. And every once in a while, when they were doing security clearances, your dad would track you down and said anything we need to know.
Yeah.
But let's talk about what was the communication like with home, and what were you writing letters? Were you getting letters from home? What kind of connection did you have to back here?
Poor.
Okay.
Mom would write, and she'd say, how you doing?
Right.
I didn't even write before I came home. I didn't write for 6 months, which was terrible. And then I got out and I called from the airport. I thought that would be cool. Well, I didn't realize what I put my folks through. But I did one thing which was kind of cool. I bought Dad a cassette radio, and I thought it was cool, and I sent it to him because I thought he'd like to. Well, they had a cassette in there, and I didn't even say Merry Christmas on I could have recorded that and sent it. But he did have it, and I had one, so we started sending tapes back and forth, and that was cool to hear, because a lot of time, hi Mom, I'm in the Gulf. Things are fine. That's about all you could say. You couldn't say much else. I know she didn't like to hear me talk about flying foons, because she was not at all happy that was happening. And and you couldn't say anything. Vietnam, you could write about Vietnam, because that was something that was going on. SOJs, you couldn't
tell them that we were doing that.
No, you couldn't. You could say you were in Japan, but you could not say anything. I don't think I talked much about SOJs with even Bud, because there's just not much you could say about that. I had a crypto top secret, and I went in and read some stuff that I wish I wouldn't have. That kind of stuff, I mean, for what got up from the reason that I did it, is stuff that so you don't, the communication from the SOJs was nil. Flying about foons scared Mom, and certainly being in Vietnam didn't help her day-to-day chores. So letters back and forth where she'd try to write stuff that was keeping me up to speed on the family, and I'd write back saying I'm fine. And that's all it was.
Do you still have those tapes from Grandpa Ole?
No, I don't know. Yeah.
So I got a question for Erik.
Okay.
Because we haven't had the chance to. We've actually had one father-son, but they were World War II Vietnam in the studio with us coming in. But in what ways did you hear when you were growing up? Did you hear your father speak much of Vietnam? Was that something that you knew about? And if so, what role did that play, kind of growing up?
Boy, I mean, obviously I knew. I knew that he served, but I would say growing up until, the whole time I was in Laurel, I didn't hear a lot. I knew he was in the Navy and flew. I knew he was on a recon plane, which I don't think I understood what that meant, other than it's secret.
Right. Yeah.
And
you got away with words.
Yeah. And I also knew that you asked about various media or culture that refers to Vietnam, I'd certainly seen some of that. And there's impressions. Well, Rambo, just watched that a while ago. It's got one image of Vietnam, but it was never the image that I saw. I mean, because obviously different people have different experiences. I think as I got older, as I became out of the house and working, and honestly after 9/11, because that's when war actually became real to my generation. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it's kind of coming through my mind. I'm seeing all this. I'm actually probably close to the age he was when he volunteered. I've got that going through my mind, and I become more curious about my old man's experiences too. So I think I developed more of an appreciation and a respect as I got older. And when I was younger, honestly, I was self-involved and dumb about it. But at the same time, it was the 90s. It was not the 2000s. It was a time when I think that culturally, war, or that war in particular, was not something that was on the forefront of people's minds. And so it didn't really occur to me sometimes until time went on. I mean, maybe that's the lesson of the whole Vietnam experience, is that we needed some time to heal, to learn, and to maybe not do it again.
Right. Yeah. Is it hard, Ken, is it hard for you to look at what we go through? I mean, we've got different engagements. Just yesterday, President Obama said we're going to keep troops in Afghanistan at a level that we hadn't anticipated. Some had seen coming, I suppose. Is it, having been a veteran of war and gone through war itself, do you look at that differently than, say, maybe a guy like me might, or do you see that?
Well, first of all, I have a lot of respect for the people that are put in the position of decisions, mm-hmm. and it's a difficult decision for him to make. Commander-in-Chief is a position that I hold in high regard. That being said, some of the decisions that come out, I support whatever he does. Some of the decisions that come out make me wonder, are we heading in the right direction? I listened to Rand Paul and his thoughts on the other side, and I sometimes wonder if we're in that course, how we would be in America today. Those are tough decisions to make. If they were easy, and then if you thought they were easy, then you don't know the grand scope of the whole situation. I'm hoping that with all the intelligence, and that I feel that our president is a very intelligent man. I don't go along with some of his decisions, but I know he's very intelligent. I've got a feeling that was a decision of great angst to him. It is an indication that we are going to lessen our presence over there. I think that's important. We're not going to be able to change, as we talked about before. America's not always right in their perception of how the world should be. I'm glad to see that we're taking a stance that's not going to be self-importance over there. The extension of that, hopefully when he made that decision, he understood that that's going to guarantee a greater safety for what's there in the long term than just pulling out, because that's going to put at risk a lot of things that we have substantially supported in the past. It's a tough decision. Knowing all that what he would have to know to either support or deny that decision, I'd have to say that I'd probably support his position, because I don't think you can just pull out. You have to have some regard for the manufacturing of that environment that you did. So you have to take some accountability that way. But I do think that being said, when we pull out, we got to stay out. We got to be able to understand that what we thought was right may not have been right, and that is better for all involved. Same with Vietnam. I don't know what the heck Afghanistan with the Russians. Wherever you're at, and you go in and try to change the course of another culture's history, you got to understand that they may not be wired that way. You are not always in the proper perspective to understand what it takes for that to work. And you have to step back at times and learn from it, and then go forward.
Yeah. Eric, I've probably stomped all over questions you had.
I'm trying to think, because you covered a few that had come to mind there. How well you were just talking about the ending, and moving forward, and how much did Vietnam shape your politics? I mean, I know very well from talking to you many times that it's difficult to put you in a box, for sure. I would never dare try. But what I have noticed is, I mean, you have a strong sense of supporting those who go out and do something. But at the same time, you have, I believe, a healthy skepticism of those who go around and say, I know what to do. Mm-hmm. I'd like to think that I've maybe inherited a little of that from you. So, but how did your experiences of the war shape that?
Geez, it's quite a question too. As far as being an individual, I've always been an individualistic person. I've never really accepted the fact that somebody has all the correct answers, and to be able to question anything, I think is an American right. So and I think, thankfully, you picked up on that. I don't know of any of the things that I did or that has happened to me in the service that has made me any different of a person than I was before I went in. In perspective in that, I think it is difficult to say that one thing in there changed me to be the individual I am. I think that was all from what I was when I was younger. And I think that's true no matter where you're at, no matter who you are, no matter how you perceive yourself to be. Maybe those who break out, maybe those who aren't wired just with those 140 or 150 chromosomes, one of them sticks out funny. Maybe that guy has not been culturally molded to perform just the way those chromosomes are all up. And thank God, once in a while we have that guy with the funny chromosome, because he opens our eyes up to an idea or to a method that's not been challenged before. So I'm afraid I'm all pretty much straight. Those chromosomes are all pretty much in a line. They're shaped by my mom and dad. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the teachings that they gave me. Certainly not in the book. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for people that have the fortitude to go through and be open enough to learn what's in books. Because you take a look at that, what that takes. You can have a guy like myself who goes through and just absorbs whatever comes into me and just keeps on functioning. That's one thing. But to have another person who is born, has that inherited, and then has the ability to absorb the outside influences of another type of philosophy that's foreign to them in a book and assimilate that, and then to try to form that into a path that they want to take, that takes a lot of, that's a tremendous trait, an attribute that I didn't have. I went to college, like I said, and found out after 2 years, not so much. But those who were able to go through it and absorb, or have the ability to open themselves up and absorb that, that goes beyond words, what you can say about those type of individuals. And then, if you're lucky enough, and if you've got the person you put in that environment, and he has that little thing sticking out in his chromosome that puts him different, and he has the ability to make people challenge what they think was a path of an accepted common ground. Boy, you've really got something there. So that's again, the box is pretty wide on me. I don't know if you even got me even close to that box. We have more challenges, Daryl, Erik, and I, putting ourselves in boxes like that. Volumes, just volumes.
What do you think? Did growing up, and one of the things that I've asked before is I have the real. It's funny because you and I both have this real strong sense. I grew up here in Billings and have a lot of ties to Laurel, and actually I consider Laurel just as much of a home. Both grandparents grew up knowing all of them, cousins, all of that, and in many ways that shaped who I still feel like. Almost the earth, the rims, they just have a way of this place has shaped people, and exactly. I suppose I've got friends who grew up in farm kids, or friend who grew up in New York City, and that shaped who he was. How did Laurel shape you, and did it serve you well during your military experience?
Yeah, I had, like I said, I had 20 cousins.
I thought it was 27.
Just 20.
Okay.
Only 20.
Yeah, 20. And those other 7, they...
Right. Well, they were cousins, but we don't... Yeah, right.
No, just 20 of us.
Just 20.
Yeah. Everything grew up... one thing, you were automatically accepted. No matter how odd or ugly or dysfunctional you were, you were automatically accepted because you were a cousin. Right. And that put me in the perspective that makes no difference what that person is, looks, or feels like. Once you come in and you get to know them, you're accepted. I'm going to say something that sounds odd, but you're taken at face value, and not by the color or the shape or the look of your face, but your inner self. And so that prepared me for being in Laurel, and having a family. Boy, I don't know what I would have done. It would have been difficult to meet the challenges that you got to do on a daily basis of some of the stuff I did, and not have a good foundation. Mm-hmm. You could be a wreck. I think you could be an absolute wreck coming out of that. And that's not to say I came out perfectly, because I think I exhibited. There are some things here that rock me once in a while. Mm-hmm. But without that foundation, without that family, gee whiz, that would be just between you and me, Daryl. Without him,
right?
I try to instill that in Bud, no matter what, where, when. That's still there. That's the gist. And he and I have talked about gist a lot. That, I think, is what prepared me going forward. Dad was not a lecturer. Dad was not a person who sat and told you. Dad was the guy who went out and did. You say people, I gravitate towards people who do. I think that's why, because Dad was a doer. Mm-hmm. He did. Every organization he got into, he didn't just stand in the back and raise his hand. He became part of the moving parts within the organization. When he got out of the organization, he still had the ability to have direction for those in the organization. So those things, getting out of the airplane and seeing the jackrabbit, that's part of it. That's what Montana gives you. But without having the base, the family base there, my goodness, I feel so I'm blessed. I absolutely am blessed. There's people out there who are still stumbling and don't have the support, the basic foundation to go forward. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah. Erik, have I anything? I keep on stomping in. So what else?
It's a little dusty in here or something. So
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Boy.
Ken? What have I missed?
The thing that you brought about the whole conversation was the fact that, and I feel like I haven't given you much, because
Don't worry about that. Everybody does, and you always do.
yeah, it's about the Vietnam experience, and I think I've kind of wandered off base at times because I've given you what a person who was in the Vietnam experience but held other positions, other than just how I have and always will have a great amount of respect for those who are boots on the ground. You know, there's a couple of guys in Laurel that are boots on the ground that did some horrific things, heroic things. I meant to say, heroic things that I'll always respect. And there's no way that we can ever say that those people were not doing what they thought was correct, because in their mind's eye they were, and we can't take that away from them. That's part of what society is trying to do. They're trying to put them in a box, and they're trying to say, because of that position, you're wrong. You were not doing things correctly, and you know you can't quantify what they did or qualify what they did in that respect, because you didn't tie your shoes the same way they did. You didn't have the same type of responsibility they did, nor did you have the same recognition of duty that they did. So, in a lot of respect, I think that's part of what I got from other people in Vietnam. When I talk about Vietnam, I think Erik hit it on the head. It's hard to put me in a box because I guard myself pretty much. And I think I do that because there's a certain amount of things that I did and I know I did that, in my mind's eye, don't qualify to be in the same type of position as those who made the ultimate sacrifice, going out crawling in the holes. And yet I understand the support that I did was really important. But understanding that those people are coming back to and integrating into our society, they have every much a right to feel proud of what they did, because what they did at that time is what they thought was and what their country asked of them to do. And that, you know, that's just like what you said. Well, how about the president's idea about the 85 or 5,500 in 17? It's a horrific decision to have to be made. If you don't consider yourself qualified to take on all of that information and give the most correct answer, that person, he made a decision that I think that isn't the right way. And those that are still staying over there, those are the same type of individuals that had the same type of criteria that the people in Vietnam did. The only thing difference is the fact that the American people now understand that there is a deliberate link between patriotism and what the American life is. And I think back there, somewhere along the line, it got folded, mutilated somehow, and it didn't press out to be the same way, because the people thought, because you're not doing this, you're unpatriotic, you don't deserve to be treated like you should be. And I think that's a shame.
Mm-hmm.
When where were you? Because I can't remember. When those last helicopters pulled out of Saigon, and what was going through your mind when that happened?
Well, fortunately, I wasn't there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was not there. I was there when the peace accord was drawn up, the last days of the war. There was a time between the last days of the war and then that Saigon thing happened. I was out of there by that time. But the last week that we were in, and I just happened to be the last crew that was in there for us. They, being the Vietnamese, threw everything that they had at us for those 7 days. That, you know, thanks, bud. that was who wanted to be the last person killed in Vietnam? That was one of the things that was discussed. Who wants to be the last casualty? And so, it was there was blocks. Maybe sometimes it's blocked out, but that time and that period, from dark till dawn, was constant. And of course we flew our missions in the daytime. So you worked on the plane, you went into the bunker, you didn't sleep there much at all. You got up and you flew 14 hours. And so, in that respect, I think I was close to being as much of a wreck as can be perceived. We know where we're leaving. It's like when you go to Vietnam, they take and put you in that SEER school. I remember if I told you about that SEER school. That's a SEER school is search, escape, rescue, and evasion, and SERE. And they take a bunch of you that are going to Vietnam, and they throw you in this camp, and they teach you how to chop up sassafras roots and drink that tea, and they don't give you any food, and they put you out in the sticks for a week. And in the last 3 days, they capture you. They put you in a compound, and then they systematically take you into these little rooms like this, and they interrogate you and try to break you. And you become somewhat, because what they're trying to do is to simulate if you were actually captured. And the thing that in that SEER school that I kept in the back of my head is it's going to end here pretty quick, and I will walk out. I'm not going to die here.
Right.
And no matter what they did to you, no matter what physically or mentally they tried to put in your head, you will survive. Well, that's the thing that those last 7 or 8 days you put in your head. You had to have some kind of goal out there. Come that day, it's done. We're flying home, and everybody did, But that little triggering mechanism, thanks, Bud. That was probably one of the more the testing was, because I knew it was going to be at the end. I knew it was coming to the end, and like they said, who wants to be the last casualty out? Mm-hmm. And so that puts you kind of on.
So that when you were at the very end there, you were the last kind of group there before the peace accords, but you were really tired too because you were going full bore.
Oh yeah, and we, just because they knew that it was the end, everybody. I mean, not just me. I'm just thinking about the guys out in the field. Because Charlie knew that we were leaving. Charlie knew that there was a peace accord coming. And that's like what, a lot of respects what's happening over there in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. How do we prevent what did we learn nothing? Mm-hmm. When we pulled out, do we want to simulate the helicopters leaving Saigon again over there?
Yeah.
How do we learn and do something? And I don't know, that's part of that whole complex question we have yet to be solved in that area over there. The last couple of days was a test.
What was when you were over there? What was it like, kind of knowing that you were the last group over there? That this might be
mixed. Thank God. Mm-hmm. It was coming to an end. Thankfully, nobody. You didn't have to go over there with a chance of, because, I tell you about Prinky,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That we all laugh about that, but
who wants to be the next guy?
Yeah. When they actually hit our compound and blew up, and the radioman that was there got hit. Who wants to be that guy anymore? I mean, I knew that guy, I liked that guy, Chief Fields, hell of a nice guy. He went through some bad times, didn't. So nobody wants to be that last guy that's over there.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of puts you in a.
Was a peace accord was the Paris Peace Accord was by a guy who was in the service, and you kind of also would know how it was received. Was that a good? Were soldiers generally happy about that from where you were sitting, or were they?
Yeah, you know, you're asking a guy that had, you know, we had a mission over there. Don't get me wrong, but we also, as soon as we were done there, we packed up and we went over and we flew SOJs and we flew Foons. So we were still put into positions where the adrenaline was rushing.
So it's still what you were still kind of going, even though GOTs were done, but you had.
We had stuff. Yeah, we had stuff. I think the whole. I got out in '73, and I can't remember. '72, May of '72 was Haiphong Harbor. I'm trying to think of when was that, the peace accord? I don't remember how many years after, I remember how many months after when we flew and got the last mission, and then they actually had the Saigon incident.
How did the Saigon incident affect you? What did you think of that? Do you remember where you were? What you?
I don't, you know, and I thought all of that for that. You know, all of that, there you go. I mean, you had nationalists who were people that we told we would help. They're going through hell. Yeah, all of that we did for that was probably one of the biggest things. I mean, you kind of got a sense of, I guess we didn't do a heck of a lot, because look what we ended up doing to sever ourselves. So that was kind of a hard thing to swallow.
Yeah. So have I missed anything for you, or Erik or Ken? Again, I always think this is, we're going to take literally four intense years of your life, and we're going to boil it down to one interview. I mean, that's foolish. But that is the model and the format. Right. So I always want to make sure, Well, I want to say a couple things. I want to say, first of all, thank you to Erik for having for wrestling your father down, and he's an independent guy, so he probably would not have done that unless he'd wanted to. But I want to say, Ken, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being here and making the time for us. Erik, thank you for writing and helping and doing this interview with me. It's my honor to be here and to witness this. It's a very cool thing to have a father and a son.
Well, and thank you for asking me, Daryl, and thank you for doing this, because like I said, I've heard some stories, I've learned some things, and I think it's important. So I appreciate being in this room. Thank you.
And I also appreciate the service, not only that you gave during the war, but also service to a place that I love too, Laurel, Montana. Thank you for a life of service. So. This has been a real honor. I've been with Ken Olson. He was in the U.S. Navy from 1969 to 1973. He is joined today in studio by his son, Gazette reporter Erik Olson, and I am Daryl Ehrlich. This has been Vietnam Voices, a series by the Billings Gazette. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening.